I made another tarot related stats video. It happened. I did it. This was an idea that just popped into my head on like December 2nd. And I had a lot of information to compile and very little time to do it because this type of video typically goes out, I think it's like November 1st. It's definitely in November. So I wanted to try and stick to their format as much as possible. And the 15th was the day that I had planned to be ready to film, which from my brain, the year is not finished. So there's still cards to be pulled, there's still information to collect, but this is how this type of video rolls. So I've been collecting the stats. I immediately started. It took me probably 2 days to start collecting the stats. So like the 2nd to the 4th, I started going through everything and collecting the stats. And in the meantime, I've been creating the information presentation and also updating my stats as they change because I'm still pulling tarot cards. And the reason why I didn't just do it December 4th when I finished compiling the information I had up to that date was because this time of year I tend to pull a lot of cards and I tend to use the bigger spreads this time of year. So we've got our year-end spreads, we've got our year to come spreads, all the reflection spreads and all of the prepare for next year spreads. Plus there was a new moon on the 12th, so I do spreads for that. So I wanted to include all that information in this data collection. So that's why I waited this long to do it. I would love it if people would do a VR to this, but I understand that it's a lot of information. And I don't know that anyone is gonna be as crazy as me about it. But without further ado, the spoof that I've done, I don't know if any of you know Spotify, have friends with Spotify, but over the last month or so, people have been posting their Spotify Wrapped. And it just talks about their number one artist that they listen to, the number one genre that they listen to, all that stuff. And it's kind of a big deal. Everyone looks forward to it. Everyone posts it on their social media, or they don't, depending. Like I was afraid I'd be embarrassed this year of mine because I listened to a lot of like EDM. I was running a lot this year, and EDM is my go-to running music. And I was like, oh gosh, please don't let my number one genre be EDM. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, I don't feel like it's an accurate reflection of my music taste. Anyway, kind of funny, whatever. So that's what I've done. I have collected information on my tarot Wrapped. And it's a spoof on the Spotify stats. My stats are very minimal compared to that. I had limited time and my brain just kind of only wanted to collect the basics. That's all I could wrap my head around in this moment. Next year might change. I don't know. But we're going to be looking at, there's only including the title page, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 slides to look at. Yes, I made a PowerPoint presentation. So it's going to be quick going through the information. And I understand it's probably not that entertaining because this isn't the tarot community as a whole. It's just me. But I thought it was fun and I thought it would be really interesting to, I don't know, tell you all my tarot Wrapped. I'm going to share it on my social media, so why not? And yeah, so we've got the stats we're collecting. I'll go over that in a minute, or that have been collected. I do want to mention at the end, I'm going to kind of go through, there's going to be chapters, and I'm going to go through things I found interesting, as well as I will show you the Excel spreadsheet in case you want to do this for yourself, or you're just super curious about how I set this up. So those will be in the chapters below for those of you who are interested. They'll be at the end after my presentation. And other things to mention, I didn't do Oracle decks. I don't tend to journal my Oracle decks, my Oracle polls. And also Oracle is just so random throughout the year. I don't really journal them, and therefore I didn't do stats on them. Next year, I probably also don't think I'll do Oracle decks. We'll see, time will tell. I don't know. I only did my own personal readings. I only collected stats on the cards that I pulled for myself. So some of you may know I do pick a card readings privately for my friends. I just post private videos for them to go through and pick cards. I did not do that. I did not include those. That would have taken me forever because I don't journal those. So I would have had to literally watch the videos and write down the cards and then put them in the spreadsheet. Didn't do that. Also, this is my own personal tarot Wrapped, so I'm not including readings for other people. What else do we have? The other problem I came across is that I'm really bad for not following my own advice. I don't journal every tarot card I pull. 2024, because of this spreadsheet, I'm going to be more meticulous about my journaling. So the stats are probably not accurate. I can only go with the information that I recorded. And in some cases, those recordings were just pictures that I took on my cell phone. Like if I was at work and did a poll, I don't have my journal at work, so I would have just taken a photo. So I went back through my camera roll and I looked at all my pictures of the cards that I pulled for myself. I keep a tarot deck at my office desk at home, my work from home desk. And my tarot journal is just probably 20 feet away, but I'm lazy, so I wrote them down on stickies. And then the stickies are just like kind of all over my desk. So I went and collected all the stickies and included those in the spreadsheet. But then there's definitely those ones where it was nighttime, I was just messing around and I did some polls. Those obviously aren't going to be included. So the stats are not going to be a very accurate reflection. Probably next year we'll do better. I'll do better. And this will motivate me to do better. So I'm really looking forward to this video for next year. And the other thing is I tried to make the slides look as close to Spotify's as I could in the time that I had, first of all, and the skill level that I have, which is, I mean, set that bar real low. I'm warning you right now, set that bar low. And the tarot wrapped sheet screens, they say your most popular artist. So I decided to stick with that, even though I think it might be a little bit confusing. So just know that when it says your, it means me, Sarah personally, Sarah's stats. So that's the other thing I just wanted to point out, and we're gonna jump into it. We're gonna start the presentation. Okay, so we've got our title card, our title for Tarot Wrapped 2023. Like I said, I did try and like borrow some of their art style this year. This didn't come close. It is not even close, but that's okay. I did what I could with the stuff I had, the information that I had. Let's first discuss the details, the deets. This is what we're looking at. So we've got the most pulled cards, the most common suit, the most common numbered cards, the most common Lenormand card, and the most used decks, because I write down all the decks that I use throughout the year. So we've got all that going for us. We're going to start with number 1, which I wanted to save to the end, but that complicated things. So number 1, your most common tarot card, my most common card. This is the card I pulled the most in 2023. It came as a surprise. Ideally, I wouldn't know this information. When you're looking at your Spotify Wrapped, it's a surprise to you. You're like, oh, this is fun. Unfortunately, I know the answer. And dun, da, 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 we have the Four of Wands. The Four of Wands was pulled the most often out of the entire 78 cards. So I wanted to do like a most common major, a most common minor, but then I also wanted to do the most common card. So logistically speaking, my most common card would be either in the major arcana or in the minor arcana. So we're starting with the most common card. So how do I feel about this? I don't feel that my 2023 was a reflection of the Four of Wands. I really don't. When we're thinking like stability and there's always someone partying, there's always that going down, a celebration of sorts, usually a wedding. I don't feel that that was my 2023. Now, if we're breaking it down numerically, fours are stabilities, wands are your passion, your drive, your creative, I was going to say creative side, and then I wanted to switch it to creativity. So, you know, it's all that. I still don't feel like I was stable in any of those areas. So this is kind of a flop to me. Maybe if I do some further reflecting, I don't know. But that was interesting. Next slide. Your most common major arcana. What was the most common major arcana that I pulled? We have the Justice card. So I want to mention the previous deck was the Everyday Witch Tarot. This is Push Kitty's Harry Potter Tarot. I did include like random decks throughout, so that's what we're working with. I chose this one with Dolores Umbridge getting the justice she deserves. This was interesting because on December 2nd, when I compiled my stats, that was not the number one major arcana. It was a different one. And then as I started doing the spreads that I've been doing over the last couple of weeks, you know, like I said, my year end, my year to come, the new moon, all of the stuff, this one, it was noticeably coming up a lot for me in the last few weeks. So that was kind of neat to see that happen. We'll get into how it got a little stressful a little later on. But yeah, my most common major arcana was the Justice card. So interesting. We'll talk more about it later. As for my most common court card, this is where it got a little frustrating for me. There was a clear winner for the most common court card as of December 2nd, a very clear winner. And yes, it was one that I resonate with personally, not just like on a 2023 level, but it is one of the most common court cards that I find I relate to if we're looking at it from personality trait standpoint. There's two that I relate to the most. She's one of them, and she was there, and I was happy about it. I was not surprised. Then the next 2 weeks happened, and I was pulling lots of court cards. And, well, here's what happened. We have a 6-way tie. So I don't think I pulled her anymore after December 2nd. It was the Queen of Cups. I didn't pull her anymore. And then I started pulling more other court cards. And then at one point I had a 3-way tie, and I was like, ooh, I don't want a tie. I want there to be one clear statistical first place. But I thought, you know, I've got time. I've got all these other spreads to do. And I'm sure that my Queen of Cups, my lady, is going to come up again. She did not. She did not come up again. And in fact, we went from a 3-way tie to a 4-way tie, then a 5-way tie. And then last night we knocked it up to a 6-way tie. So this is the unofficial Shitty Tarot. As we can see, we've got the Page of Cups, who's the other court card that I really relate to on my own personality level. We've got the Knight of Cups. We've got the Queen of Cups. We've got the Queen of Wands. We've got the Knight of Swords. We've got the Knight of Pentacles. I don't know what this means. I don't know what to think of this, that there is a 6-way tie. I'm really interested to see if next year with my what I'm sure will be meticulous stat keeping, if it will end up the same, if there will be any more ties. I feel like I'm lucky that there weren't ties in the most common pulled card or the most common major. So it'll be interesting to see if next year there are ties as well. This one I think is huge. I think this is a massive tie. But yeah, so that's my most common court cards of 2023. And again, that's the unofficial Shitty Tarot Chef's Kiss. I love it. I don't know how I feel about that dude being chosen for the Knight of Swords, though. That was the guy that the two of them were seeing for a while, and they were kind of competing over him. David and, oh gosh, what is her name? The front desk. Oh my God, Stevie. Anyway, next slide. My most common suit. This one I had the most fun with as far as keeping track of the stats. There was always a clear winner. Now this statistic includes court cards. So every cup, every sword, every pentacle, every wand. So it's not just the ace through tens, it's the ace through the king. This one maintained its first place all throughout the last couple weeks. And this does make sense for me personally. So the cups were the most pulled suit in 2023, in case you couldn't guess from the court cards. So it kind of wavered a little bit. It kind of jumped over the last couple weeks from 30% to 29%. So we settled at 29%. Everything else is fairly close. So we've got the next closest is our pentacles at 26%. The next one is wands at 24%, and then the swords are at 22%. I typically don't pull a lot of, yeah, I'd say swords and wands are not typically my most pulled cards. Funny though that the Four of Wands was the most pulled card of the year. But this makes sense to me. This works for me. It was kind of funny that I noticed at the end of this year, my mentality has kind of changed. I'm starting to think about applying for new jobs, applying for other jobs within my office. Like, it's not like I'm leaving or changing careers. And once that decision was kind of made in my head, I really started pulling a lot more pentacles and wands. So that was kind of interesting to watch. But then over the last couple of days with my year-end and year-to-come things that I've been doing, the swords kind of crept up and beat them out. The swords at one point was only 17 or 18%. So this was kind of interesting. It was really fun to see. And I do consider myself a very emotional person. I tend to, I wouldn't say emotional, empathetic. I feel like I'm an empathetic person. So I feel that falls into the suit of cups. So this doesn't surprise me. This, good for you. Good for me for being able to predict that. Next, we have the most common numbered minors. So this was a slide and information I put together last night because I started to notice a pattern. I was like, I wonder. So this one was, I had to, like I said, input the stats last night, collect the data, and there was a clear, I don't want to keep calling them winners. There was a stat that was higher than the rest. So this is just the ace through the tens. I literally counted how many aces I pulled, how many twos I pulled, how many threes I pulled, how many fours, etc. So the most common numbered, this pie chart made me feel rage because the max in Keynote, this presentation was made in Keynote on the iPad, the max number of colors you can have is 6. So we had to repeat some colors. But we start with the aces at 8%. The twos are 15%. That was the one that came out on top. The threes were 9%. The fours were 11%. The fives were 8%. The sixes were 11%. The sevens were 9%. The nines were 8%. The tens were 11%. So everything is pretty close here. With the lowest, we have a three-way tie for the lowest being the 8%. Which was the aces and the eights and the tens. But yeah, clear winner with the twos, which is interesting because do you recall my most pulled major arcana? Lady Justice. So we can talk about that in the things I found interesting section. And most common Lenormand card. So I started learning Lenormand in 2023. And this was one I did not journal a lot, mostly because I was practicing. Like I would pull cards to practice all the time. And I didn't journal those because they were just playing. Like they weren't really a divination pull. So I really only pulled the ones that were for divination purposes. And so the Memento Mori Oracle, for example, I pulled the Lenormand cards out of that deck and I worked with the Lenormand cards a lot, but just practicing. I didn't really do any major pulls with them. It's also kind of important to mention that this stat has changed because I've been doing on Instagram, A Place to Dock is doing a really fun Lenormand challenge for December. I've really been enjoying it. If you're wanting to learn Lenormand or you're just beginner at Lenormand, fantastic little game to play. I think she tells you to pull 3 cards for every day / question. If you're just learning, you can pull 1 just to get the meanings, or even just 2. I was doing the 3s, so this stat is going to change probably drastically from now until the end of December. I think it only goes to the 24th, I'm not sure. But as of right now, coming in hot, we have the Whip. The Whip was the number 1 card I pulled throughout the year. This was not a clear winner. There were several other Lenormand cards that were just 1 stat away from being tied with the Whip. So as far as the Whip's meaning, when I first started reading Lenormand, I thought the Whip was read as the lilies, which was like the, hey, meaning, if you catch my drift. But now I've kind of changed that to be the lilies are the hey, and the Whip is more like repercussions or punishment or fast action or conflict, that kind of thing. So I'm not sure how to take that as far as how my year went. Either way, if we're looking at the hey or the whoosh meaning, I don't really think my 2023 fits either of those. But it depends on what cards you pull with it, as Lenormand is. So maybe I should have done my top 3 most common Lenormand cards. Maybe that's a better next year. Write that down. Shoot, I'll write that down later. Yeah, so that was the most common Lenormand card. And like I said, that'll probably change because there's several other cards that are right up behind it. So it'll probably change by the end of the year. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue to take the stats because the whole point of the stats was for this video. So if I'm keeping the stat, I don't know, whatever. And I think our last slide here, yes, is my most used decks. So I write down in my journal, when I journal my card pulls, I write down the date, I write down the spread, if it's a spread, if I use a spread, the name of it, and then I write down the deck I used. Thank God, otherwise I would have had no way to compile this information, to keep track of this, to add it all up. In 4th place, we have the Golden Art Nouveau. The Golden Art Nouveau is my go-to RWS clone. I'm not a huge fan of the RWS clone. I don't love the colors, I don't love the line work. So this is my go-to RWS. This is my go-to. If I can't decide what deck to use, the Golden Art Nouveau it is. So no surprise. I feel like maybe I'm surprised it's in 4th place, but we will discuss. Number 3, we have the Spreadsheet Tarot. This is one that I picked up in 2023, I believe. I think I got it in the spring. So had you just asked me, what do you think were your most used decks this year? I wouldn't have said that one. However, when I sat back and thought about it, I did realize that, okay, back in June or July, if you follow my monthly wrap-up videos, I created my own 10-day ritual. And that was to work with a deck every day consecutively for 10 days to try and either, if it was a new deck, build a relationship with it, or if it's an existing deck, to develop a relationship with it. Because I have so many decks, but I use them like sporadically. Like I used to, when I first started reading tarot, I would spend one whole month with a deck. If I was going to read cards, let's say July, for example, was a bright and cheery deck. So I would pick a bright and cheery deck to use for the month of July. And I wouldn't use any other deck. But I found that I got really bored with that. And I was like, oh, I'm sad that my other decks aren't getting used. So then I was like, screw it. Use whatever deck you feel like using. And because of that, I kind of don't really have personal relationships with any specific deck, really. So I did the 10-day ritual with the Spreadsheet. And I enjoyed it so much, I kept going after the 10 days. I'm not entirely sure how many days I stopped at, but the Spreadsheet Tarot is also the tarot deck that stays at my work from home desk. And when I pull cards, when I'm sitting at my desk, that is the deck I use. And that was the deck all over the stickies. That was the deck that was used for the sticky note readings, card notes. So yes, when I think of it that way, okay, that makes sense. 3rd place, we've got the Lightseers Tarot. This is also kind of a go-to if I can't really decide what deck to use and I'm feeling those festival young adult vibes. I will pick the Lightseers Tarot. And this is the deck that I like to read with other people. Not that those stats are in here, but I feel like it is a pretty universal deck. Not surprised it's on this list. Like I said, if you would have asked me, what decks do you think you used the most this year before I collected the stats, I would have said the Golden Art Nouveau and Lightseers for sure. Now, the number 1 deck I used the most this year, we have the cute little Lenormand. And this makes sense to me. Would I have said that this was the most used deck of 2023? No, but when I sat back and thought about it, I learned Lenormand this year-ish, tried, sort of. That was the deck I used. The Memento Mori I did start using. I did switch it up a little. That was, I don't remember when I got the Memento Mori, but it was definitely in the second half of the year. So I was kind of conflicted if I wanted to even include a Lenormand deck in this stat, but if not, okay, 1st place goes to Lightseers, 2nd place goes to Spreadsheet, 3rd place goes to Golden Art Nouveau. So I did include it just because I was like, well, it is the deck I used the most this year. And it does make sense because I was learning Lenormand, and that was the only Lenormand deck I used when I was learning. So Makes sense. Not surprised. Thus concludes my Tarot Wrapped 2023 statistical analysis, statistical video. All right, so now we can talk about things I found interesting / behind the scenes. And then after this, I'll show you the spreadsheet for those of you who are interested in that sort of thing. What I found interesting, I did briefly mention it going through my Tarot Wrapped, and that was that my number one major was Justice, and my number one pulled numbered card were the 2s. So to me, that's a really strong indicator that balance was a theme for 2023 for me. Balance was something that came up frequently. Obviously in the minors, balance is going to be, it's going to have a different meaning depending on what suit it came from. So if I'm looking at my spreadsheet, the most common suit that pulled 2s was the Pentacles, followed by a 2-way tie between the Wands and Swords, followed by the Cups. That makes sense. That tracks for what's been going on in my life, especially in 2023, mentally, where my head has been, what I've been thinking about a lot, and what I've been wanting for myself. So it tracks that 2s would be the most pulled numbered card. And it also tracks that Justice would be the most pulled major. Obviously, the major arcanas are more bigger picture things, and the minor arcanas are more day-to-day things. Clearly, both of which I need to either work on balance for, or maybe in some cases I did have good balance with those things. Probably not, though. And this is why doing this kind of stat collection is really interesting for me, because I'm able to go back and look at it as a whole. You know, what were the cards, what was a common theme for me that the cards were trying to convey over the last year? Very fascinating for me. I'm so glad I did this, and I'm so glad that I can look back at all of these figures and say, yeah, wow. It's just kind of like validating the cards for me. It's validating the information that they give me, and also the fact that I do agree with them, and okay, message received. So that was something that I really found very, very interesting. And I also did touch on how when I had that mindset change from starting to apply to new jobs, how I definitely started to pull more Pentacles and more Wands. I did write notes. So up to the end of November, Cups was in the lead by a lot. In December, I had a mindset change around my job, and subsequently I pulled more Wands and Pentacles in December. That's that. So going forward, and we will talk about this in the Excel spreadsheet, for 2024, I'm going to collect the stats on a monthly basis. So for each month, I'm going to have all of these stats, and then there will be a master that adds everything together for the year as a whole. So I do think that at the end of every month, it'll be interesting to see what was the most pulled major for the month of January, what was the most pulled minor for the month of January, and just kind of see if there's a relationship there. I don't really know that it's going to be as interesting as it is as the year as a whole. I think all the numbers together is more interesting to look back at, but I am going to do it on a monthly basis and see how that works out as far as what I think happened in that month, and do I think, yeah, that makes sense. All right, how did I pick card and deck selection process for each slide? This was tricky, and that's why I included it in this segment, because let me tell you, I went through every tarot deck I own and looked at those Justice cards. A big factor was that YouTube goes this way and not this way. So if it went this way, there's so many other cards I would have chosen, but I ultimately decided to go with a mini deck because it's shorter and fatter and fits better on the slide. And that was a process to pick the slides, to pick the cards. The last few days, when these numbers were kind of coming to an end and there were some clear winners here, I've spent a lot of time going through my decks, going through the cards that I wanted to reflect on the slide, and going through the decks I wanted to use. Oh my gosh, that was fun. One of the ones I really wanted to get in there was the unofficial Shitty Tarot. And it made its way in there, and not only one card, but it was 6 cards that made its way in there. So that was stressful. It's one thing to sit there and say, Justice was my number 1 pulled card. But if you need to choose one card to reflect that, oof. And, logically, I could have selected from my most pulled deck, but I wanted a variety. I wanted to have a bunch of different decks in there. And the Lenormand one, I don't really have that many Lenormand decks, so I just stuck with the cute little Lenormand, and it was a big part of my year this year, so sure. Let's get into the spreadsheet. So I'm actually going to change the camera angle so you're just looking at the spreadsheet. You're not going to see my face. You might see my hands. And I'm going to show you the one I've created for 2024. I'm not going to show you the 2023 one because I've made significant upgrades, in my opinion, to how I'm going to collect the data in 2024. The 2023 spreadsheet's a little messy looking. So yeah, I'm just going to show you what I've got planned out for 2024, and we'll go over the formulas and all that jazz. So I'm going to get myself situated, and then we will take a sneak peek at my spreadsheet for 2024. All right, so I'm sitting in the dark because it was rather glary. Wondering why there's a sticky in the top right corner. It's because my full name's up there. So we're just covering that baby up. You might even be able to see through it. Hope not. Now I do have to be careful because this laptop is a touch screen, so I have to be careful what I'm touching. And it is flickering. I'm so sorry. It's flickering on my iPhone video. I don't know if it's going to translate when I actually upload it. I sincerely hope it is not. Because that's, flash warning. Okay, so this is 2024. Tarot Wrapped 2024. You can see at the bottom, there's a master, and then it goes January, February, March, April, and then decks. That's only because I was too lazy to do anything past April. I will definitely go in and do the other months. It's just when I was setting this up, that's as far as I got. So this is the master spreadsheet. So what this one is going to do, I don't even have to touch this page, this tab at the bottom. I have created the formula to pull from each monthly tab. So when figures get added into January, they automatically populate here. Then when I add figures in March, April, whatever, it adds all of them together. So the formula you want to use for that, let's just look at the Fool, is equals sum, bracket, the name of the sheet that you're pulling the information from. So first we have Jan, followed by an exclamation point, followed by the cell, which is always going to be B2 for the Fool. So the Magician would be B3, B4, etc. Then you're going to do plus the next tab, which is February, exclamation point, B2, again, always going to be B2 for the same card, plus March, exclamation point. So that'll pull from all of your other sheets. Same with every single one. Now here, down here, we have the percentage. It looks like an error right now because there's no figures. So it's kind of like, I don't know what to do with no information. So I can never remember this math formula. So it's the number of cards pulled in that suit times 100 divided by the total number of cards pulled in each suit. And if you click on the cell, you can see that is the formula up top. So we have equals, bracket, E18 times 100. So E18 is going to be the total number of cups pulled divided by E21, which is the total suit pulls. So this cell is that plus that plus that plus that. Make sense? So that's what every sheet looks like. If we click on January, I've just followed the same formula. So in January, I'll see the total number of cups pulled for that month, the percentage of cups pulled for that month, the total number of major arcana cards pulled for the month of February. And then, like I said, it gets added to the master. I don't even have to touch this. You can probably notice that there's a Lenormand on the master, but there isn't a Lenormand on the monthlies. And that's because Lenormand isn't my major method. What's it called? I guess. So I don't know if I'm going to be pulling Lenormand cards monthly. So right now it's just in the master. There's no formulas for that. Like, these cells are all completely just whatever. And when I pull a rider, I'm going to put 1. Next time I pull a rider, I'm going to put 2. I'm undecided if I'm going to include this in the monthly or just keep track of it as a whole. Undecided. That's something I can always go back and fix, provided I journal all my divination style Lenormand readings. Then the last tab is decks. So this is how I keep track of the decks. What I've done is alphabetize them, and I did include the Lenormand decks. What I wanted to do is the same kind of thing that I did with the Lenormand. So the Lenormand, if I didn't have it in 2 columns, it would be this one long column, and I have to scroll down to get to the bottom. And I was getting kind of annoyed doing that in the 2023 spreadsheet. So I just cut it in half and did that. So I thought about cutting it in half for the decks as well. But the problem is I don't know how to alphabetize the different columns. Like, I don't know how to keep them like this ends at M. How do I start M over here? I'm sure there's a way to do it. I don't know how. Also, there's going to be, I'm probably going to buy decks this year in 2024. So I'll be adding. So I think that my plan is to leave it as is for now and just Control F. So to find a deck, Control F, and let's say I used the Zombie Tarot, provided you spell it right, it'll bring you to that deck. So I think that's how I'm going to handle this one, just Control F and include the stats that way. But yeah, that is the spreadsheet. If you have any questions, like obviously you can comment or Instagram me, coyote.tarot on Instagram, and I can try and help you as much as possible. I am not an Excel wizard by any means, so I can help you as much as I can. And I do understand that this is probably a lot of information to collect, and probably not a lot of people are going to do it. Even if you don't make a YouTube video out of the results, like I felt the need to, like I said, it's still interesting to see as a whole what you have pulled. And I found this super fascinating. I love Excel, as we know, so it was really fun for me to collect the stats as well and see them changing over the last couple of weeks. Like, even though it was annoying with the court cards, it's like, oh, this one's creeping up. But it was cool to see the major arcana change throughout the last couple of weeks. Like, that number 1 place got knocked out and Lady Justice came in and took first. So I definitely would recommend doing it, but I can see where this would be daunting, especially if you pull several times throughout every single day. I plan on keeping this, like, my laptop stays under my bed. So at night, when I tend to do most of my card pulls, I just pull out the laptop and kind of enter them as I go. In 2024, I think I might do it on a monthly basis, like the end of every month, go through my tarot journals and start including the figures, add up the figures at the end of every month. We'll see. I don't know. Probably going to stick with the monthly plan. I don't know. We'll see. But that's the spreadsheet. And thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.